Sometimes the hardest part of co-parenting is realizing you can't fix everything anymore. You can't control the relationship your kids have with their other parent, and learning to let go of that was one of the hardest boundaries I ever had to learn. Hey there! Welcome to Momma Drama and Trauma. I'm your host, Jenny Kimmel, and today's episode is really just about a part of my story that took me a long time to understand, and that is boundaries in co-parenting. Not the kind of boundaries you read about in books, not the kind that sound neat and tidy when someone explains them, but the kind you figure out slowly in real life while you're still healing, still parenting, and still trying to move forward after everything changed. Because boundaries in co-parenting are not clean and simple. They happen in school parking lots, they happen at sporting events, they happen through quick text messages about schedules, they happen at graduations and family moments that don't look the way you once imagined they would. They happen when you're tired. They happen when emotions are still close to the surface. And sometimes they happen when you're trying to figure out how to be the bigger person while still protecting your own peace. For me, boundaries were never about cutting someone off or being cold. They were about learning how to carry myself in situations that were complicated and sometimes painful. And over time, I realized something. Boundaries are often quiet decisions. They are internal. They are about deciding how much emotional energy you are going to give to something and how much you are not. So today, I just want to share what that looked like in my life, what I struggled with, what I learned the hard way, and what it looks like for me now. What boundaries actually look like in real life. When people talk about co-parenting boundaries, a lot of the advice sounds good on paper. Communicate clearly, stay neutral, do not engage emotionally, protect your peace. All of that is true, but it can feel very different when you are actually living it. In real life, boundaries are not about pretending things did not hurt. They are not about acting like you are fine when you are not. They are about deciding how you want to carry yourself in situations that are complicated, emotionally loaded, and sometimes painful. For me, one of the most practical boundaries I had to learn was how to show up in shared spaces without letting bitterness run the show. There are moments when I see my ex-husband and his current girlfriend in public spaces connected to my kids. Events, activities, places where we are all there for the same reason, which is our kids. And the truth is, I could choose to be hostile. I could choose to be cold. I could choose to let anger speak for me. And maybe at one point in my life, that would have felt justified. But I had to ask myself a bigger question. What am I modeling for my kids in these moments? Because my kids are watching how I carry myself. They are watching how I respond when things are uncomfortable. They are watching how I treat people even when there is history and hurt there. And what I realized is that I do not want to model bitterness as a lifestyle. I do not want to model resentment as something that gets to live rent-free in my body. I do not want to model that holding on to anger is strength. So sometimes my boundary looks like choosing grace, not because the situation deserves it, but because my peace does. Sometimes my boundary looks like being cordial even when I feel a knot in my stomach. Sometimes my boundary looks like not engaging in tension or drama even when part of me wants to react. not because I am pretending things did not hurt, but because I am choosing not to carry that hurt forward into every interaction. My kids have even asked me before how I can be around them without it bothering me or making me mad. And my answer is simple and honest. This is part of being an adult. Sometimes you bite your tongue, sometimes you let things go, sometimes you choose not to hold on to something that will slowly tear you down. There is nothing I can do to change what happened. There is nothing I can do to rewrite how things ended, but there is something I can do about how I carry myself now. That is what boundaries look like in real life. They are not dramatic, they are quiet, they are internal. They are the choice to not live in bitterness. They are the choice to move forward even when the story did not end the way you wanted it to. They are the choice to protect your peace, not by controlling the situation, but by controlling how much emotional energy you give to it. And that, whether we realize it or not, is one of the most powerful things we can model for our kids. That life does not always turn out how you planned, that people disappoint you, that situations are unfair, and that you can still choose to move forward without letting those things define how you show up in the world. The boundary I learned the hard way. One of the hardest co-parenting boundaries I had to learn was stepping out of the middle of my kids' relationship with their dad. In the beginning, everything felt raw. The change was sudden. The emotional impact on the kids was real. And because I am a fixer by nature, my instinct was to try to manage the situation. I wanted to protect my kids from pain. I wanted to make sure their relationship with their dad stayed intact. I wanted to encourage connection. I wanted to smooth things over. I wanted to be the buffer between hurt feelings and hard conversations. So I found myself doing things that at the time felt loving and protective. I would remind my kids that he is their dad. I would encourage them to give him grace. I would try to frame things in a way that kept the peace. I would worry about whether the relationship with him was okay. I would emotionally carry that responsibility as if it were mine to fix. But what I didn't realize in that season was how much emotional weight I was taking on that was never meant to be mine. It is not a parent's job to manage the other parent's relationship with the kids. It is not my job to make him show up. It is not my job to repair what he does not put effort into. It is not my job to emotionally regulate a relationship that I am no longer part of. And the more I tried to do that, the more drained I became. I was putting energy into making sure something was okay that I had no control over. I was emotionally investing in outcomes that were not in my hands. And over time, that started to take a toll on me. I was carrying stress that didn't belong to me. I was feeling responsible for dynamics I could not control. I was emotionally exhausted trying to manage something that was never my role to manage in the first place. What I eventually had to accept was this: my role is to be their mom, to be their safe place, to listen to them, support them emotionally, and model healthy communication and boundaries. But it is not my role to mediate their relationship with their dad. That shift was not easy. It felt uncomfortable at first. It felt like I was letting go of control. It felt like I was stepping back when every instinct in me wanted to step in. But stepping out of the middle was actually one of the healthiest boundaries I have ever set for myself. Now, when my kids vent to me, I listen. I validate their feelings and let them feel what they feel without minimizing it. but I don't step into the middle of the relationship or try to manage it for them. I am not relaying messages or trying to control outcomes. Instead, I gently remind them that this is something they will need to work through with their dad. Not because I don't care, but because it is not healthy for me to carry that emotional responsibility for them. And when I communicate with my ex-husband now, it is strictly about logistics. It is about the kids. It is about schedules. It is about what actually needs to be communicated. We are not processing emotions together. We are not discussing relational dynamics. We are not unpacking feelings. We are not analyzing what could or should be happening in his relationship with the kids. That boundary has protected my peace in ways I did not expect. It has created emotional space for me to focus on my relationship with my kids instead of managing a relationship that is not mine to manage. It has allowed me to conserve emotional energy. It has helped me step out of fixer mode. And it has reminded me that being a good mom does not mean carrying everyone's emotional responsibility. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to step out of the middle of something that is not yours to fix. What boundaries look like now in day-to-day co-parenting? One of the biggest shifts in my co-parenting journey has been simplifying communication. In the beginning, communication carried a lot of weight. Every text felt loaded. Every interaction felt emotionally charged. There was history underneath every conversation, whether we acknowledged it or not. And that made even simple logistics feel heavy. What has helped protect my peace over time is narrowing the scope of what communication is actually for now. At this point, our communication is strictly about the kids or our dog. That is it. There is no need for emotional processing. There is no need for revisiting the past. There is no need for discussing how anyone feels about the divorce, the relationship, or the choices that were made. Those conversations no longer serve a purpose in my life. That boundary alone has changed the emotional tone of co-parenting for me. It has taken conversations out of the emotional realm and placed them firmly in the practical realm. Schedules, school, transportation, appointments, things that actually need to be communicated in order for life to function for our kids. Another boundary that has helped protect my peace is being intentional about how much emotional energy I give to co-parenting interactions in general. Even when communication is neutral and logistical, there is still emotional weight underneath it simply because of the history and the season we have come out of. So for me, this boundary is less about what is being said to me and more about how I choose to hold it. I don't carry conversations emotionally beyond what they need to be. I don't replay messages in my head. I don't attach extra meaning to tone or timing. If something is about the kids, I handle it. If it is not something that directly affects the kids, I let it stay where it is. That doesn't mean I'm cold. It means I'm clear. It means I'm intentional about where my emotional energy goes. It means I'm choosing not to reopen emotional doors that I worked really hard to close for my own healing. There are also boundaries around timing. I'm learning that I don't need to respond immediately to every message. Just because someone reaches out does not mean I have to drop what I'm doing and engage right away, especially when I'm working, resting, or spending time with my kids. Creating creating space between receiving a message and responding to it has helped me respond more calmly and less reactively. And then there is the boundary around not filling in the gaps for him anymore. If there is a school meeting, the email goes to both of us. If there is a senior event, he is informed. If he chooses not to show up, that is not something I am responsible for managing or correcting. I'm no longer the person who reminds, nudges, organizes, and emotionally compensates for someone else's lack of follow-through. That was a hard boundary to learn, not because I didn't care, but because I had spent so many years being the one who carried the weight of making things happen. Letting go of that role meant accepting that some things may not look the way I would prefer. It meant accepting that I cannot control how someone else shows up. It meant accepting that my kids will eventually form their own understanding of who was present and who was not. What I can control is how I show up. I can show up consistently. I can show up grounded. I can show up emotionally available for my kids without being emotionally available for unnecessary conflict. I can protect my peace without disconnecting from my role as a parent. These are the kinds of boundaries that are not flashy. They do not make for dramatic stories, but they change the day-to-day experience of co-parenting in a very real way. They reduce emotional drain. They reduce resentment. They reduce the sense that you are constantly carrying more than your share. And over time, those small practical boundaries add up to something meaningful. They create more stability. They create more emotional space. They create room for you to focus on your own life and healing instead of staying entangled in dynamics that no longer serve you. The weight of being the flexible one. One of the most exhausting parts of co-parenting, especially in the season I'm in right now, is feeling like I'm always the flexible one. Since the beginning of the year, my kids have been staying with me most of the time. They are older now. 2 of them are technically adults, and 1 of them is right on the edge of adulthood. At this point, I'm not going to force them to go somewhere they do not want to go. They are old enough to have preferences. They are old enough to voice what feels comfortable for them, and I respect that. But the reality of that choice is that a lot still falls on me. I'm the one making sure everyone gets to school on time. I'm the one making sure forms are filled out. I'm the one making sure pictures are submitted for senior slideshows. I'm the one tracking deadlines, events, meetings, and schedules. I'm the one who shows up to parent meetings, school functions, and all of the little behind-the-scenes responsibilities that no one really sees. And I'm doing all of that while also trying to build a career, build a brand, and build a business for myself. That is a lot to carry. It's a lot of mental load. It's a lot of emotional labor. And sometimes it feels like the responsibility never really shifted. It just changed shape. A practical boundary I have had to learn in this season is naming what is mine to carry and what is not. I can't carry every gap that someone else leaves. I can't emotionally compensate for someone else not showing up. I can't take on responsibility for someone else's choices, even when it is disappointing, even when it affects my kids, even when part of me wants to step in and fix it. There are moments when he doesn't show up to meetings. There are moments when he doesn't show up to events that matter to the kids. And as hard as that is to witness, I have had to learn that I can't chase that responsibility for him. He receives the same emails I do. He is aware of the same events I am aware of. And if he chooses not to be present, that is not something I can control or correct. That boundary is not about indifference. It is about reality. It is about acknowledging that I cannot be the safety net for someone else's absence. I can be present for my kids. I can support them emotionally. I can hold space for their disappointment, but I cannot take on the burden of trying to make someone else show up in ways they are not choosing to. Another boundary I've had to learn in this season is allowing myself to feel the weight of being the flexible one without turning that weight into resentment. It is easy to let exhaustion harden into bitterness. It is easy to feel like everything is unfair, and sometimes it is, but carrying resentment does not make the load lighter. It just adds another layer of heaviness. So the boundary for me becomes this. I allow myself to acknowledge that this is a lot. I allow myself to feel tired. I allow myself to name the imbalance, but I don't let that turn into a story that keeps me stuck. I try to meet this season with honesty instead of bitterness, with acceptance instead of constant resistance. Being the flexible parent is not easy. It requires a lot of emotional maturity. It requires a lot of self-regulation. It requires boundaries that protect you from burning out while still allowing you to show up for your kids in meaningful ways. And it is okay to admit that this role is heavy. Naming that weight is part of taking care of yourself within it. Acceptance as a boundary. One of the most powerful boundaries I have learned in co-parenting is acceptance. Not the kind of acceptance that means I agree with everything that has happened. Not the kind that minimizes the pain of how things ended, but the kind of acceptance that recognizes what is actually within my control and what is not. For a long time, I think I confused acceptance with giving up. I thought if I stopped trying to influence certain outcomes, it meant I did not care. I thought if I stopped pushing for things to be different, it meant I was being passive. But what I have learned is that acceptance is not passive. It is intentional. It is the choice to stop fighting battles that only drain you. There are so many parts of co-parenting that I simply can't control. I can't control what happens at his house. I can't control how he shows up in his relationship with the kids. I can't control whether he attends every event, meeting, or moment that matters. I can't control the choices he makes or the priorities he sets. And spending emotional energy wishing those things were different does not change them. It only takes energy away from where I actually have influence. Acceptance becomes a boundary when I decide that I am no longer going to spend my emotional energy trying to manage what is outside of my control. When I decide that I'm no longer going to carry disappointment over and over in my body for the same patterns. When I decide that I'm going to put my energy into the spaces where I can actually make a difference. And where I can make a difference is in how I show up for my kids. By being consistent, emotionally available, present, and grounded. By being a safe place for them. By showing them what it looks like to move forward without becoming hardened by what has happened. And that disappointment doesn't have to define you. Acceptance has also helped me release the need to control narratives. I don't need to correct every perception. I don't need to defend every choice. I don't need to make sure everyone understands my side of the story. My life doesn't need to be understood by everyone in order for me to live it with integrity. That has been a huge part of protecting my peace. Letting go of the need to explain myself. letting go of the need to manage how things are perceived, letting go of the need to make sure everything looks a certain way from the outside. Those things create pressure that does not actually serve me or my kids. Acceptance is also what allows me to let moments be what they are. Some co-parenting moments are awkward, some are uncomfortable, some carry emotional weight. Acceptance allows me to move through those moments without attaching extra meaning to them, without replaying them, without letting them take up more space in my mind than they deserve. And in a very practical sense, acceptance helps me make cleaner decisions. When I am not fighting reality, I can make choices based on what is actually happening instead of what I wish was happening. That clarity helps me set better boundaries. It helps me conserve emotional energy. It helps me respond instead of react. At the end of the day, co-parenting is not about creating a perfect dynamic. It is about creating a stable one. It is about doing the best you can within the reality you have. It is about choosing peace over constant emotional struggle. And acceptance is one of the boundaries that makes that possible. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic, but it is steady. And sometimes steady is exactly what your nervous system needs. As we wrap up today, I just want to remind you that co-parenting boundaries are not about doing everything perfectly. They are about doing what is sustainable for you. You are allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to step out of the middle of things that are not yours to fix. You are allowed to simplify communication. You are allowed to accept what you cannot control. None of that makes you cold. It makes you grounded. If this episode connected with something you are navigating right now, I want you to know you do not have to carry it alone. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is slow down long enough to let ourselves reset emotionally before stepping back into the noise of everyday life. You'll also find a reflection guide on my website at mommadramaandtrauma.com called Healing Through Boundaries. It goes along with this month's theme and gives you a simple space to pause, reflect, and think about what boundaries might look like in your own life. And there's also a blog post there that goes a little deeper into this conversation and the boundaries I've been learning through my own journey. Sometimes it helps just to sit with these ideas and see what resonates for you. None of this is about fixing everything overnight. It's simply about creating a little more stability and a little more peace in the middle of real life. And if you're in a season where you're trying to rebuild your life after a hard chapter, I just want to say this: you are doing better than you think. The fact that you are here, listening, reflecting, and trying to grow tells me you care deeply about the life you're building and the example you're setting for your kids. As always, you are strong, you are worthy, and your story matters. Until next time, take care of you.